The thermal imaging screen flickered in shades of blue and white as Warrant Officer Marcus Chen adjusted the helicopter's camera controls, his hands steady despite what he was seeing. 3 human-sized heat signatures were sprinting across an open field. Behind them, something enormous, something that shouldn't exist, was gliding over the ground with impossibly long strides. What happened in the next 47 seconds would haunt him for the rest of his life. It had started like any routine training flight that morning. Marcus and his co-pilot, Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell, lifted off from Joint Base Lewis McChord at 6 a.m. The Blackhawk's mission parameters were simple: low-altitude navigation practice through the foothills of the Cascades, testing the upgraded thermal imaging system, and logging 4 hours of flight time. A typical foggy Tuesday morning in the Pacific Northwest. The mist was heavy at takeoff, but expected to burn off by noon. Marcus had 23 years of flight experience, including 3 tours in Afghanistan. Sarah was newer, 5 years in, but sharp, calm, and precise. They made a solid team. Neither of them believed in monsters. At the Charlie checkpoint, Sarah called out over the intercom as they banked left over a mountain ridge. The rotors sliced through early morning fog. Below, endless evergreen forests stretched towards snow-capped Mount Rainier. Marcus switched the thermal camera to wide-scan mode as part of their systems check. The monitor showed a sea of cool blues and greens, dotted with warm signatures, deer or elk, moving through the brush. Everything looked normal. Everything was exactly as it should be. Then Sarah pointed. "What's that?" 2 o'clock, maybe half a mile. Marcus panned the camera. In a small meadow jutting out from the dense forest, 3 heat signatures glowed on the screen, definitely human. Their body temperatures stood out against the cool grass. They were moving fast, too fast for a normal hike. "Maybe lost hikers," Sarah suggested. Marcus zoomed in. The figures weren't jogging, they were sprinting across the clearing. 2 seemed to be helping a third who was struggling to keep up. Marcus's instincts kicked in. People don't run like that unless something's wrong. "I'm bringing us down for a closer look," he said, dropping altitude from 3,000 to 500 feet. The Black Hawk descended smoothly, its twin engines humming as he leveled off. Through the standard camera, the scene became clearer. 2 men and a woman. The woman was limping, supported by the others. "Should we report this?" Sarah asked, hand already reaching for the radio. That's when Marcus saw it. On the thermal display, a new heat signature appeared from the tree line, much larger, moving upright on 2 legs. At first, Marcus thought it was another person, maybe someone chasing them, but the thermal readout was wrong, way too big. Even from this distance, the stride length was 3 to 4 meters per step. Nothing human moves like that. "Marcus, are you seeing this?" Sarah's voice had changed, still professional, but edged with unease. The figure on the thermal feed was closing in fast. Marcus estimated it stood at least 9 feet tall, judging by the trees it passed. Broad shoulders, massive frame, unmistakably bipedal. It moved with a strange, deliberate gait, not quite human, but with an eerie intelligence in its pursuit. "Keep recording," Marcus said. "What the hell is that thing?" He didn't have an answer. In 2 decades of military service, Marcus had seen plenty through thermal optics, enemy combatants, wildlife, vehicle traces, but nothing like this. The creature, because that's what his mind had accepted it, was stopped at the edge of the clearing. On the screen, its head turned toward the fleeing hikers. Then it did something that froze Marcus's blood. It bent down, and when it straightened, it was holding something massive. Through the fully zoomed-in optical lens, Marcus saw it clearly: a thick log, nearly the width of a telephone pole and about 4 feet long. The creature lifted it effortlessly, like a baseball bat. "It's going to throw it," Sarah whispered. She was right. The being drew back its arm in a motion both alien and disturbingly familiar, like a grotesque parody of an Olympic javelin thrower. The log launched through the air with terrifying force, slamming into the ground just 10 feet from the running hikers, exploding dirt and grass on impact. The woman stumbled and fell. One man stopped to help her. The other turned and waved his arms furiously toward the pursuer. Even from 1,500 feet up, Marcus could see the panic in their movements. Then the creature emerged fully from the trees. In daylight, through the normal camera, Marcus saw it for the first time in full detail, covered in dark brown hair, enormous and upright, its arms hanging down past its knees. Its face, Partially visible was a haunting blend of human and ape, with deep, intelligent eyes filled with fury. "No way," Sarah said. "That can't be real." But it was real. Another object came flying through the air this time, a rock the size of a basketball. It whistled past the hikers' heads, close enough for them to duck and stumble. "That thing's toying with them," Marcus realized. "It could have hit them if it wanted to." "We need to intervene," he said, surprised by how calm his voice sounded. "How?" Sarah shot back. "We don't have weapons. This is a training flight. We've got the helicopter." Sarah understood instantly. The rotor wash might be enough to scare it off. There was only one way to find out. Marcus pushed the collective forward and dropped the Black Hawk fast. 800 feet, 500, 300. The helicopter's massive rotors blasted downward, flattening the grass and shaking the trees. At 200 feet, the wash became a localized storm. The hikers heard the thunder of the blades before they saw it, looking up with faces filled with desperate hope. The woman was clearly injured, her ankle or knee supported by her companions as they struggled through the field. They were about 200 yards from the far tree line, but at the creature's pace, it would reach them in less than a minute. Marcus brought the Black Hawk down to 150 feet, positioning it between the hikers and the pursuer. The rotors howled, churning the air into chaos. Grass flattened in concentric circles, debris turned into shrapnel, and the twin turbine engines roared like thunder. Through the side window, Marcus watched the creature's reaction. It stopped mid-stride, one arm raised to shield its face from the artificial storm. For a moment, it stood perfectly still, and Marcus couldn't help but think it might not be enough. This thing might actually be capable of challenging a military helicopter. Then, it stepped back. Its mouth opened, emitting a roar that was drowned out by the engine noise. It raised both fists toward the aircraft, a gesture so disturbingly human that it sent a chill down Marcus's spine. But it was retreating, slowly, reluctantly, back toward the trees. "It's working," Sarah said, eyes locked on the thermal monitor. "It's backing off." Marcus held position, using the helicopter like a herding dog, keeping the creature at bay while the hikers made their desperate dash for safety. Now he could see a faint trail, a path leading back toward the distant edge of the forest. The creature reached the tree line but didn't disappear. It stood there, half hidden among the massive Douglas firs, watching. Even from this distance, Marcus could feel its intelligence and its rage. This wasn't just an animal frightened by noise. This was something capable of reasoning, planning, and hating. "The hikers are almost at the trailhead," Sarah reported. "Do you want me to call in ground support, search, and rescue?" "Not yet," Marcus said. "Let's make sure they're clear first." He held the Black Hawk steady for another minute after the hikers vanished into the woods. The creature still lingered on the opposite tree line, a glowing heat signature that refused to retreat. Finally, as if conceding the hunt was over, it turned and melted back into the wilderness. Marcus exhaled, then banked the helicopter toward the forest trail. They followed the 3 human heat signatures for half a mile through the canopy until the trees opened onto an old logging road. The hikers had collapsed on the gravel. 2 men were tending to the woman's injured leg. Marcus knew what they were about to do wasn't exactly in the training manual, but this situation was far from ordinary. The Black Hawk set down about 50 feet from the exhausted group, its downdraft scattering dust and pebbles. Marcus kept the engines running while Sarah jumped out with the medkit. Through the windshield, he watched her approach the hikers. Their expressions shifted from terror to relief, then disbelief as they realized help had arrived. The woman was young, maybe mid-20s, her left ankle swollen to twice its normal size. One of the men older, probably her father, judging by their resemblance, had cuts on his forearm and a shallow gash on his forehead. The younger man, boyfriend or husband, Marcus guessed, seemed physically unhurt, but his eyes stayed fixed on the forest, wide and stunned. Sarah returned after 3 minutes. "The woman needs immediate medical attention, possible fracture, definitely a severe sprain. The older man's injuries are minor. All 3 are in shock. Let's get them on board." It took another 5 minutes to get everyone loaded. The woman cried softly in relief as they lifted off, her father holding her hand. The younger man sat by the window, still staring down at the treetops below. "Thank you," the father said through the headset after Sarah passed it to him. "Thank God you were there. That thing, it came out of nowhere." Can you tell us what happened? Sarah asked, switching on the flight recorder. The younger man spoke first, his voice trembling. We were hiking the North Face Trail, 2 days in. Everything was fine until this morning. We started hearing these knocking sounds like wood on wood, you know? Like someone hitting trees with a stick. The woman nodded weakly. Jake wanted to check it out. I told them we should turn back, Emma said, her voice trembling. But we thought maybe other hikers were in trouble. Jake, the younger man, continued. We followed the sound for about 20 minutes. It kept moving always just ahead of us. Then it stopped. Total silence. That's when we knew something was wrong. The father took over. The smell hit us first like a wet dog mixed with something rotten. Then we saw it, just standing there between 2 trees, staring at us. At first, I thought it was a bear standing upright, but its face looked almost human. Jake nodded. It didn't attack right away. It just stood there, watching us for maybe 30 seconds. We started backing up, slowly, no sudden moves. Then I screamed, Emma said softly. I couldn't help it. When it took that step toward us, when I saw how big it really was, I just screamed. That's when it charged, the father said simply. We ran. What else could we do? It chased us through the woods for at least a mile. Emma tripped, sprained her ankle. We had to carry her. I thought we were dead when we hit that meadow. There was nowhere left to run, just rocks and open ground. It threw things at us, Emma whispered. Branches, rocks. I don't think it was trying to hit us just to make us move where it wanted. Like it was hurting us, Jake added. Like it knew exactly what it was doing. Marcus listened in silence as the Black Hawk cut through the sky toward the regional hospital in Enumclaw. The hiker's story lined up perfectly with what he and Sarah had witnessed, but hearing it firsthand made it all the more real and impossible to explain away. What do you think it was? The father asked. You saw it, right? On your camera? Marcus and Sarah exchanged a glance. We saw something, Marcus said carefully. Everything was recorded. The authorities will review the footage. That was Bigfoot, Jake said bluntly. I know how it sounds, but what else could it be? 9 feet tall, covered in hair, walking on 2 legs. That was a damn Sasquatch. Nobody can tell me otherwise. They touched down at Enumclaw Regional Hospital 18 minutes later. The medics were already waiting. Sarah had called ahead during the flight. As the crew placed Emma on a stretcher, her father gripped Marcus's hand. The footage you captured, don't let them bury it. People need to know what's out there. Marcus nodded but said nothing. He wasn't sure what would become of the recording, whether it would be classified, dismissed, or quietly erased, but he knew what he had seen. After the hikers were taken into the emergency ward, Marcus and Sarah sat in the silent cockpit for a long time, engines off, rotors still turning lazily. We're going to have to file a report, Sarah said finally. I know. They won't believe us. We've got thermal footage, optical video, timestamps, GPS data, everything. Sarah was quiet for a moment. My grandmother used to tell stories about a wild man in the mountains, coast Salish legends. I always thought they were just folklore. She paused. Maybe they're not. You really think that's what this was? Don't you? Marcus didn't answer right away. He was thinking about the creature's eyes, its intelligence, its deliberate movements, the way it used tools and used terrain to its advantage. No, he said at last. I don't think it was just a story. The flight back to base was eerily quiet. Marcus replayed the encounter over and over in his mind, analyzing it like a combat engagement. Its behavior was tactical, intelligent. It had driven the hikers toward open ground, where they'd be most exposed. It had used ranged attacks. It had retreated only when faced with overwhelming force, and even then, reluctantly, after calculating the risk. What bothers me, Sarah said as they neared the airfield, is that it wasn't afraid of us. Not exactly, Marcus agreed. It was angry that we interfered, but not afraid. She nodded. It raised its fists at us, not in fear, but in rage, like it understood what we were. Marcus knew she was right. That gesture, the way it faced them down, wasn't panic. It was defiance. It knew exactly what a helicopter was. It had seen aircraft before. And that realization led to a thought Marcus didn't want to examine too closely. They landed at 1,400 hours, 2 hours behind schedule. Major Collins was already waiting on the tarmac. An unusual, and ominous sight. Chen, Mitchell, my office, now. The debriefing lasted 3 hours. They replayed the footage, thermal and visual, over and over. Collins brought in 2 other officers, then a man from intelligence Marcus didn't recognize. The questions were meticulous, repetitive, precise, designed to find inconsistencies. At any point, did you feel the aircraft was in danger? The intelligence officer asked. No, sir, Marcus replied. The creature posed no threat to us at altitude, but it was aggressive toward the civilians. It was chasing them. The officer leaned back slightly. You believe the projectile throws indicated hostile intent or defensive behavior? Perhaps the hikers entered its territory. With respect, sir, Sarah interjected, it followed them for over a mile. That's not defense, that's predation. The intelligence officer typed a few notes into his tablet. And the civilians? What did they report? Marcus recounted the hiker's story, watching the officer's expression remain perfectly neutral, no hint of belief, disbelief, or anything at all. Was there any discussion among them or with medical personnel about what they saw? Yes, sir. They identified it as a Sasquatch. Marcus paused. A Bigfoot. And what about you, Chief Warrant Officer? What do you think it was? Marcus chose his words carefully. I observed a large bipedal organism exhibiting clear signs of tool use and tactical reasoning. Its physical characteristics don't match any known wildlife species native to the Pacific Northwest. Beyond that, sir, I can't speculate. The officer gave a curt nod. The footage has been classified top secret. You both understand that you are not to discuss this incident with anyone outside this room, family, friends, or especially the media. Understood? Yes, sir, they replied in unison. There will be a follow-up investigation. You may be called for further testimony. Until then, you'll resume standard duties. Officially, this was a routine training flight that experienced a minor technical malfunction, resulting in an emergency landing to assist injured hikers. That's the record. After the meeting, Marcus and Sarah walked in silence toward the parking lot. Only when they were sure they were alone did Sarah speak. A technical malfunction, she said dryly. And the hikers? Injured from a fall while climbing. No mention of any animal encounter. She gave a bitter laugh. 20 minutes of HD footage showing something the world's never seen, and it's going to vanish into a classified file somewhere. You surprised? Marcus asked. No, just disappointed. Marcus understood. They had captured something extraordinary, perhaps one of the most significant wildlife discoveries in North American history, and it would never see the light of day. But he also understood why. Panic, media frenzy, hunters flooding the forests. Maybe classification was the right call. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. His mind replayed the encounter, the creature's movements, its eyes, its intelligence. He opened satellite imagery of the region on his laptop, studying the terrain. The meadow where it had happened was remote, at least 15 miles from the nearest paved road. But there were other clearings nearby, connected by a network of valleys and ridgelines that formed natural corridors through the dense forest. If one of these beings existed, logic suggested there could be more. A breeding population. How many? Dozens? Hundreds? How had they remained hidden this long in the age of satellites, thermal imaging, and surveillance cameras? Then it struck him, maybe they weren't hiding at all. How many similar reports had been buried just like theirs? How many soldiers, pilots, and forest rangers had seen something and been told to forget it? He thought of the hiker's father and his plea, don't let them bury the footage. But Marcus had taken an oath. He had signed the papers. The footage wasn't his to share. 3 days later, there was a knock at his door during lunch break. It was Sarah. Have you heard about the search and rescue operation? Sarah asked. Marcus frowned. What operation? It started this morning. 3 hunters went missing in the same area. Their truck was found at the trailhead about 5 miles from our meadow. Marcus felt a cold knot form in his stomach. How long have they been missing? 2 days. Their families reported them Sunday night when they didn't come home. 2 days, the same window as their encounter. Marcus couldn't shake the thought that the hunters might have wandered into the same territory, heard the same wood-knocking sounds, followed the same strange noises. They're not going to find them, Sarah said quietly. Are they? She asked after a pause. Marcus didn't answer, but they both knew what he was thinking. The creature was intelligent, strategic. It had only retreated from the helicopter. 3 men on foot wouldn't stand a chance. The search lasted a full week. Tracking dogs followed the hunter's scent for nearly 3 miles before losing the trail near a stream. No bodies, no equipment, just a dropped flashlight. The official conclusion: the men had gotten lost in the wilderness. It happened every year. People underestimated the terrain and overestimated their own skill. Marcus and Sarah never spoke of it publicly, but he knew she'd reached the same conclusion he had. The creature didn't just pass through that forest, it lived there. It had territory. It defended it. The hikers had been lucky. The helicopter's intervention had saved them. The hunters hadn't been so fortunate. 2 weeks after the encounter, Marcus received a phone call at home. The number was blocked. Warrant Officer Chen. "Good afternoon," a calm voice said. "This is Dr. Patricia Reeves, Department of Anthropology, University of Washington. I understand you recently had a rather unusual experience during a training flight." Marcus's training kicked in immediately. "I'm not sure what you're referring to, ma'am." "Please don't worry, Mr. Chen," Reeves said smoothly. "I'm not a journalist. I'm not looking to expose anything. I'm part of a small academic group that studies anomalous wildlife reports. We occasionally liaise with government agencies quietly. I can't discuss operational matters," Marcus said flatly. "I understand," Reeves replied. "But let's say hypothetically if someone encountered something unusual in the Cascades, something that didn't fit known wildlife patterns, wouldn't that person want to know they weren't alone? That there have been 43 similar reports in the past decade?" "43?" Marcus asked. "Just in Washington state?" "43, she confirmed. Marcus's grip on the phone tightened. "These reports come from credible sources," Reeves continued. "Military personnel, park rangers, field biologists, people trained to observe and record data. Yet not a single one of those reports has ever been made public. Odd, don't you think?" "What exactly do you want from me?" Marcus asked. "Nothing that would jeopardize your position," Reeves said. "But you might want to know that the area where your mechanical malfunction occurred has a long history. The Muckleshoot and Yakima tribes have oral traditions about that exact valley centuries old. They call it the Valley of the Wild People. They've always known something lived there." "Lived there?" Marcus repeated. "Lives there," Reeves corrected. "The elders still leave offerings at certain sites. They still avoid particular trails during specific times of year. They have protocols, ways of coexistence that have worked for generations." Marcus processed the information silently. "And the government?" he asked finally. "Some parts of it, no," Reeves said. "The question isn't whether these beings exist. It's how to manage knowledge of their existence. Imagine the impact," she continued, "if it became public that a population of 9-foot-tall bipedal primates lived in the Cascades. Logging, real estate, tourism, entire industries would collapse. The Endangered Species Act alone could shut down half the Pacific Northwest economy." "So the reports are classified," Marcus said quietly. "Exactly," Reeves confirmed. "The witnesses are debriefed, the data sealed, and life goes on. But, Mr. Chen," her voice lowered, "these beings are growing more aggressive. Human encroachment is pushing deeper into their territory. The encounters are becoming more frequent and more violent." Marcus said nothing. After a pause, Reeves added, almost whispering, "You didn't hear this from me, but one of the missing hunters was found barely alive. He's at Harborview Medical Center, under psychiatric care. He claims he was held for 3 days." "She said they showed you things," Dr. Reeves continued, "that they warned you about something that's coming." "Warned me?" Marcus asked. "Warned me about what?" "That's the question, isn't it?" Reeves replied softly. "The old tribal stories describe the wild people as guardians, protectors of the forest. But protectors from what? And what happens when the forest can no longer sustain them?" The call ended there. Dr. Reeves said she'd told him all she could. Marcus hung up with more questions than answers. But one thing had become clear. The encounter hadn't been random or isolated. It was part of something larger, a hidden reality, coexisting with the world of men. In the months that followed, Marcus found himself paying closer attention to wilderness reports, missing persons, bulletins, unexplained disappearances, search operations that ended too quickly, official explanations that didn't quite add up. The patterns were there, if you knew where to look. Clusters of vanishings in specific regions, almost rhythmic in frequency. Sarah noticed it too. Though they never spoke of it openly, she would sometimes forward him articles with neutral titles like Curious Trends in Mountain Safety Statistics or Unusual Migration Patterns in Local Wildlife. They both knew what they were really looking at, circling around a truth neither dared say aloud. They were probing into something they weren't supposed to touch. 6 months after the original encounter, Marcus received classified orders, a special assignment, a covert transport operation, details to be given on site. When he arrived, Sarah was already there, along with 4 other crew members he didn't recognize. Their briefing officer was a new face, a colonel from a unit Marcus couldn't identify. "You've all been selected," the colonel began, "because you have prior exposure to Category 7 fauna." Category 7. So they had a classification system for it. The colonel continued. "We need experienced crews for a series of surveillance flights. Recent seismic activity in the Cascades has triggered behavioral changes among certain populations. We'll be running aerial observation quietly. No engagement unless absolutely necessary for civilian safety. Flights begin next week. Predefined routes, specific time windows. Thermal systems always active. Focus on abnormal wildlife movement." On those missions, Marcus saw things that confirmed his worst suspicions. Thermal signatures moving in coordinated groups through valleys officially listed as uninhabited. Structures massive, unnatural deep in the forests, absent from any map. Trail systems that appeared and vanished with the seasons. On one flight, they recorded something extraordinary, what appeared to be a gathering. 17 large bipedal heat signatures converged on a mountain meadow under the full moon. They remained for hours, standing in a circle before dispersing back into the woods. The footage was immediately classified beyond Marcus's clearance level. Sarah later developed a theory. These beings migrated within specific corridors, moving between territories seasonally guided by food availability and human encroachment. Encounters occurred, she believed, when humans accidentally crossed those migratory routes or entered a core territory at the wrong time of year. "They're not monsters," she said one evening, breaking their unspoken rule of silence. "They're just trying to survive. We're the ones trespassing in their world." Marcus agreed at least partly, but something still troubled him. The creature that chased the hikers hadn't merely defended its territory it had hunted. It used tactics. It made decisions. That suggested something beyond mere animal instinct. A year after the original incident, Marcus received another call from Dr. Reeves. This time, she wasn't calm. "Something's coming," she said bluntly. "All the indicators are there, spikes in sightings, increased aggression, territorial markings in new regions. Something's driving them out of their traditional ranges." "Driving them out?" Marcus asked. "What could drive out something like that?" "Could be climate shifts," Reeves said. "Habitat loss, or something else encroaching on their territory. The tribal elders are uneasy. They say the wild people are gathering more of them, in greater numbers than anyone's seen in generations." "Gathering for what?" "No one knows," Reeves said quietly. "But, Mr. Chen, if you're called on assignment in the coming weeks, be very careful. The rules of engagement may have changed." Her warning proved true. 2 weeks later, a family disappeared from a popular campground, not a remote wilderness, but a developed recreation site, surrounded by dozens of other campers. They vanished from their tent in the middle of the night, leaving behind all their gear, their car, everything except themselves. Marcus and Sarah joined the search operation, flying grid patterns over an ever-expanding area. On the 3rd day, they found something, but not the family. Trees bent and broken in strange, deliberate formations, as if something massive had forced its way through. The ground team documented large footprints in soft earth, then quickly destroyed them. Scratch marks gouged into tree trunks, 15 feet off the ground. The family was never found. The official report stated they'd gotten lost, possibly fallen into one of the many ravines nearby. But Marcus had seen the recovered footage from the family's own camera before it disappeared into the system. Thermal signatures moving through the forest organized, coordinated and circling the campsite just before the family vanished. The creatures were no longer merely defending their territory. They were expanding it. More incidents followed. A group of trail runners reported being stalked for miles by something just beyond sight, always close enough to hear its presence through wood, knocks, and stones striking trees. A team of forest rangers abandoned a construction site after discovering massive handprints on their equipment and deliberate arrangements of fallen trees surrounding their camp. Each incident was neatly explained, rationalized, and filed away. But for those who knew what to look for, the pattern was unmistakable. The beings were becoming bolder, more aggressive, and far less interested in avoiding human contact. Marcus often thought back to that first encounter, the intelligence in their eyes, the fury when the helicopter intervened. He wondered if they remembered, if they held grudges, if they could plan on a scale that humanity had yet to comprehend. 2 years after the original incident, Marcus was promoted and reassigned to a different unit. His replacement was briefed on the special surveillance missions, the Category 7 protocols, and the restricted areas to avoid. Sarah transferred 6 months later, taking a position with a civilian medical transport company. They kept in touch discreetly through unmonitored channels. Sometimes Sarah sent him clipped news stories about missing hikers or unexplained wildlife activity. Sometimes Marcus shared coordinates where training flights had been mysteriously rerouted. The encounters continued recorded in classified files that would never see daylight. The creatures still moved among humanity, protected by bureaucracy, skepticism, and the simple truth that acknowledging them would unravel too much of the carefully constructed modern world. But Marcus knew the truth. They were out there occupying the space between what we know and what we refuse to accept. Intelligent, territorial, and increasingly unwilling to remain hidden. The forest had its own citizens, its own culture, its own laws, and humanity was running out of room to pretend otherwise. 5 years passed. Marcus now worked mostly behind a desk, flying only occasionally. Encounters had grown so frequent that an unofficial handbook for Category 7 events quietly circulated within certain military circles, though it was never formally recognized. New pilots were briefed with skepticism, until their own experiences stripped that skepticism away. Meanwhile, the native tribes began to convene. Elders from across the Pacific Northwest gathered in sacred places, speaking in languages long forgotten, performing ceremonies not practiced in decades. When asked, they would only say they were maintaining the old agreements, preserving a peace that predated written history. Marcus attended one of those gatherings, invited by a Muckleshoot elder named Joseph Whitefeather, who had somehow heard of his encounter through channels Marcus couldn't trace. They sat together beside a ceremonial fire as smoke drifted through the cedar trees. "They were here first," Joseph said, his voice low and steady. "They're watching the smoke rise from a sacred flame, just as we are. When my ancestors arrived, we learned to share the land. There were rules, boundaries, times when the forest belonged to them and times when we could enter. It worked for generations." "What changed?" Marcus asked. "Everything," Joseph said. "Logging, development, highways. You've cut through their lands. They've been patient, but patience has limits. The young ones don't remember the old agreements. They don't understand why they must stay hidden while your people take more and more." "And the young ones?" Marcus asked quietly. Joseph smiled sadly, gazing into the fire. "They're tired of hiding. You think the one you saw was old?" Joseph asked, his voice low and steady. "No," he said before Marcus could answer. "It was probably young, 40, maybe 50 years old. The elders, the older ones, are far larger, far wiser. They're the enforcers of the old pacts, the ones who keep the young from striking at humans openly. But they're dying, Mr. Chen. And when they're gone, the agreements die with them." The weight of that sank in like a cold wind. If what Marcus had seen was merely a young one, then somewhere, hidden deep in the wilderness, there were older, greater, more intelligent beings. And if their cultural structure, the very thing that restrained them, was collapsing, what then? "What can we do?" Marcus asked quietly. Joseph's eyes glimmered in the firelight. "Remember that they exist," he said. "Remember that they have rights, that they were here first. Remember the agreements, even when everyone else forgets, because forgetting is what will destroy us all." Marcus left the gathering with more questions than answers, but also with a sense of duty. He had seen behind the curtain, witnessed something few would ever believe. That knowledge came with a responsibility to protect both worlds, the visible and the unseen. The helicopter footage from that October morning remained classified, locked away on a government server, officially non-existent. But Marcus remembered every frame, the way the creature moved, the intelligence in its eyes, the moment when two worlds collided 45 meters above a mountain meadow. He thought often of the 3 hikers they had saved. Emma's ankle had healed, though she never went hiking again. Her father had tried to tell their story publicly, but no outlet took him seriously. Jake became obsessed, spending weekends searching for proof, haunting online forums where others shared encounters dismissed as fantasy. Everything had changed in those 47 seconds when the impossible became undeniable. Marcus flew for 3 more years before retiring. His final flight took him over the same region where the encounter had occurred. From above, the meadow looked peaceful, untouched. No sign of the chaos that had once unfolded there. But on the thermal display, just for an instant, he saw it, a single massive signature among the trees, watching the helicopter pass. Marcus tilted the aircraft slightly and raised a wing in acknowledgement. Through the screen, the figure lifted one arm, not in threat but in a slow, deliberate wave before disappearing back into the forest. After retiring, Marcus settled in a small town on the Olympic Peninsula, close enough to feel the presence of the mountains, but far enough to avoid unwanted encounters. He volunteered for search and rescue missions, using his skills to help lost hikers, quietly steering them away from regions he'd marked on his own private maps. Sometimes, late at night, he'd hear wood knocks echoing from deep within the forest. 3 knocks, silence, then 3 more. He'd learned by now what that meant. It wasn't a warning, it was acknowledgement. We know you're there. We know you know we're here. Keep your distance, and we'll keep ours. Sarah visited from time to time. She'd had her own encounters over the years, medical evacuation flights that took her into remote places where she'd seen things she couldn't explain. They'd sit on Marcus's porch, watching the pines sway in the wind, saying little. There was no need. They both understood what lay beyond the tree line. One evening, Sarah broke the silence. "Do you ever regret saving those hikers?" Marcus thought for a long moment. "No," he said. "It was the right thing to do. But sometimes I wonder what would have happened if we hadn't been there. If the footage didn't exist, would anyone have believed them? The creature might have killed them," Sarah said softly. "Maybe," Marcus replied. "Or maybe it was just warning them, showing dominance. We'll never know what its true intentions were." Sarah was quiet for a while, then said, "I've been thinking about something Dr. Reeves asked once. What are they protecting the forest from? What if it's us?" Marcus looked at her. She went on, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if they're the antibodies, and we're the infection?" It was a disturbing thought, but not an impossible one. Every year, more forests were cut, more trails carved through once untouched wilderness. And each year, the knocking in the distance seemed to grow a little closer. Many have ventured into places that had remained untouched and peaceful for centuries. Whatever these beings are, they've been pushed into ever-shrinking territories. Their migration routes are severed, their food sources depleted. The native peoples had lived alongside them for millennia. Marcus once said there had to be a way to coexist. Their population had dwindled, they took only what they needed. They respected boundaries. But could modern society ever do the same? Marcus doubted it. And that, he thought, was the tragedy. The creatures would either adapt, retreat deeper into the wild, or one day be exposed when there was nowhere left to hide. And when that day came, he wasn't sure who would be in greater danger, them or us. 10 years after the encounter, Marcus received a package with no return address. Inside was a flash drive containing gigabytes of data. Thermal videos, photographs, recordings documenting encounters all across North America. Tucked inside was a handwritten note from Dr. Reeves. "The truth needs guardians. Keep it safe until the world is ready." Marcus spent weeks combing through the files. The scope was staggering, hundreds, perhaps thousands of documented encounters spanning decades. Military footage, ranger reports, indigenous testimonies, all painting the same picture. A parallel population surviving in pockets of wilderness, still beyond human reach. What unsettled him most were the patterns in the data. Migration routes cut off by development. Breeding grounds logged or mined. Water sources poisoned by industry. These beings weren't simply clashing with humanity. They were being driven to extinction methodically, perhaps unintentionally, but relentlessly. Recent records showed escalating aggression, larger groups moving together, behavior that looked more like desperation than territorial defense. The fragile coexistence that had endured for millennia was fracturing. and there were no protocols for what would come next. Marcus thought about releasing the data, forcing the world to confront what he had known for a decade. But he also understood why it had been hidden. Panic, exploitation, trophy hunters, scientists eager to trap and dissect. Discovery would destroy them as surely as ignorance would. So Marcus became a silent guardian, one of the few who knew, yet could never speak. He added his own files to the archive. The footage from that October morning, Sarah's testimony, the hikers' accounts. Evidence for a future time when humanity might finally accept that we were never alone and never had been. Sometimes Marcus flew a small civilian plane over the Cascades, tracing the old valleys and waterfalls. From the air, he could feel them beneath the canopy, still moving, still watching. He often thought back to that morning, the creature's gaze locking with his through the lens, two minds recognizing each other across an impossible divide. The world isn't ready for the truth, he thought. Maybe it never will be. But the truth endures. In the darkness between the trees, in the silence after the knocks, in the hurried footprints that fade beneath the moss, and in the stories dismissed as legend. Marcus had once been a soldier, trained to identify and eliminate threats. But that morning on the Cascade Ridge, he learned that sometimes the greatest threat isn't what we can see, but what we refuse to acknowledge. These beings were never the monsters of this story. They were survivors clinging to shrinking territories, upholding ancient accords only they remembered. The helicopter footage remains classified, perhaps forever, but Marcus knows what he saw. 9 feet tall, dark-haired, intelligent enough to use tools and tactics, strong enough to throw a tree trunk like a spear. It was real. They are real. And they are running out of places to hide. Late at night, when the wood knocks echo through the forest, Marcus thinks about what lies ahead. Will there come a day when the last of them vanishes, becoming pure legend, surviving only in sealed archives and tribal memory? Or will humanity finally recognize them and learn to share this planet with another intelligent race? He doesn't know, but he keeps watching, keeps recording, guarding a secret that was never truly a secret at all. Because someone has to remember. Someone must be ready to speak when the world is finally willing to listen. The thermal camera had captured 47 seconds that changed everything. A creature that shouldn't exist, chasing hikers who shouldn't have been there, interrupted by a helicopter that shouldn't have intervened, and a truth that should never have been buried. But it was real. They were real. Marcus Chen, once a decorated officer with 23 years of service, a man who had faced enemy fire and rescued soldiers under attack, had never been trained for what he found that October morning in the Cascades. He discovered that monsters are real, that they are intelligent, and that they are losing patience with a world that denies their existence. The footage will never be released. The truth will remain sealed. But Marcus will remember. Sarah will remember. The hikers will remember. And somewhere in the deep forest, the beings themselves will remember the day their hidden world collided with ours, in the rotor wash of a military helicopter. The encounter lasted less than a minute. Its consequences will last forever. Because once you know that the impossible is real, you can never see the world the same way again. Every forest becomes a question. Every unexplained sound, a possibility. Every missing hiker, a reminder that we share this planet with something we don't understand, something we've chosen not to understand. Marcus lives with that knowledge every day. The burden and the privilege of seeing beyond the veil. He saved 3 lives that October morning and became part of a much larger story. A hidden history of 2 species struggling to share the same world without destroying each other. And still, from the forest, the knocking continues. 3, then 3 more, then 3 again. Marcus listens from his porch, knowing what it means. We're still here. We remember. We're watching.